Hey, it's the Empire, Geoboxing Empire, Backstream Boxing. Now, my boy, Gary Russell Jr., the fastest fighter in boxing, by far. I think he's the fastest fighter by boxing, by far, especially at this point of his career. He called out Terrence Bud Crawford, and not only that, he got Haymon to send a contract to Bob Arum. You know, Gary Russell contacted Al Haymon and said, man, send this guy a contract. We want to get this fight happening right away. Now, if you guys didn't know, this whole Terrence Crawford, Gary Russell beef happened when my boy Barbershop Conversations interviewed Gary Russell Jr. And Gary Russell Jr. talked about the day that he broke Terrence Crawford's jaw. And that story was so big, so magnificent, so inspiring that Terrence Crawford had to respond. He had to respond. I mean, you had people talking about this story from like, I don't know, I'm not sure how many years ago it was. You had people who were in a camp and they had to tell their side of the story. It was just a big mess. But that whole debacle got this fight in serious talks. Now, man, this is what boxing's all about, man. This is what boxing's all about. It's about one of these smaller fighters fighting these big fighters to prove their dominance. And in boxing, man, you never know what can happen. You never know what can happen. Now, if you don't know anything about the welterweight division, a lot of these welterweight champions are multi-division world champions, right? If you look at Terrence Crawford's resume, he is, a multi-division world champion before he got to welterweight. The guy went from 135 to 140. I believe he's a 3-division world champion. So that's a big accomplishment, right? If you actually look at other fighters like Robert Gross Guerrero, he skipped the weight class to fight Victor Ortiz. And if you look at people like Manny Pacquiao skipped the weight class to fight Oscar De La Hoya. So there's a lot of times, I can keep going on and on too, but there's a lot of times in boxing how these smaller fighters would basically chase the bag at the 147 division, and they'll skip a weight class to fight a big name. Now, in Gary Russell's case, man, I mean, the guy's coming from 126 to 147. That's an extreme jump. But understand that my boy has history with Terrence Crawford. Gary Russell Jr. has history with Terrence Crawford. A lot of people would be like, oh, the guy is too small, he's this and that. But understand, they've been sparring since they're in the amateurs. So when they start in round one, that's not really round one. That's probably like round 100 or something like that. Because all they do is spar each other in the amateurs. And in the amateurs, Gary Russell was the alpha, and he was running stuff in the amateurs. So that being said, there's a lot of things that Gary Russell knows about Terrence Crawford that a lot of people don't know about him, right? His weaknesses, how to beat the guy. If you throw enough punches, you can catch him. I mean, we all seen the Terrence Crawford struggle against people like Yurkus Gamboa. He got wobbled in that fight, right? We just seen him recently get dropped by Mean Machine. People say this guy's chin, is it really all that? Well, like I said earlier, Gary Russell, a featherweight, said he broke his jaw when he was in the amateurs. So we're going to see this whole thing play out, man. And Gary Russell isn't playing. People thought he was a joke and he was just talking. No, he's serious, and he got Al Haymon to write that contract. And at this point in Terrence Crawford's career, Terrence Crawford cannot get a big fight, man. He cannot get a big fight. A lot of people are blaming Top Rank for him re-signing to Top Rank. He should have never did that. They're talking about, I'll make a video about this later, I won't touch on it too much, but Keith Thurman basically gave him an ultimatum. He said, listen, you're going to fight me. If you don't fight me, then I'll fight Kell Brook, and you're not going to get that Kell Brook fight. He says, we can offer Kell Brook more money. So you're going to fight me, or you're not going to fight anyone at all. So if Terrence Crawford doesn't fight Keith Thurman, he's not going to fight Kell Brook, because Haymon's going to basically pay Kell Brook mind-boggling amount of money, and that Bob Arum just won't pay. I'll talk about that in another video. But yeah, man, so I'll be really excited to see the Gary Russell Jr. versus Terrence Crawford fight. I remember, I don't even like the guy that much, but my boy Kell Brook, right? I mean, it was back when the Kell Brook Errol Spence thing was happening, and it was like really USA versus the UK. And man, at the time, Kell Brook hasn't really fought anyone, besides Sean Porter. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. But when he went up to fight Triple G, the fight actually happened, and Kell Brook was winning a couple of those rounds. that was the wildest time in boxing history. I swear it was, because Triple G was deemed as a monster at the time. And Terrence Crawford, he's seen wildly as the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world. So he's seen as almost untouchable. That being said, he's put on such a pedestal that if any fighter does really, really well against him, especially coming down from 126 to 147, that's bigger than life right there. That's Goliath, Goliath versus David. Yeah, I don't read the Bible. Whatever, I think it's David. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, you understand what I mean, right? So we're gonna see how this whole thing plays out, man. I'm gonna root for Gary Russell Jr. He's a smaller fighter, coming from 126 to 147. That's an extreme difference. It's 20 plus pounds right there. So we're gonna see how this whole thing plays out, man. If any fighter from 147 goes to 168 or 175, you have to root for the guy, right? It's the same. This is the same situation, right? It's hard not to go for the small guy. The guy is challenging himself. He believes in himself, and he's going for broke. And we're gonna see this fight, man. I hope Terrence Crawford signs that contract, because it's either Gary Russell Jr. or Keith one-time Thurman. And knowing Bob Arum, if I were Bob Arum, I would put him in with Gary Russell Jr. just because, yeah, people are going to talk about how you're not going to get any credit, but at the same time, everyone's going to be tuned in for that fight. This fight is the fight. Honestly, Gary Russell Jr. is not just a big fighter. He's not just a big name, but he actually talks to people who actually support him, like the LTBC. He talks to Barbershop Conversations, talks to people like that, and it'll make the fight less promotey and like gimmicky. It feels real. It feels real, and it is real. This is a fight that came out authentically. This is an authentic fight. This is what a story was told. Someone, Terrence Crawford took it the wrong way, and now they're gonna settle it in the ring. This is what boxing's all about, baby. This is the new age of boxing. Not that promotion stuff and he said this and no, man. This is street stuff, man. This is street stuff. I heard you said this. I heard, hey, Barb told me you said this on the block. Well, what's up? What you trying to do? Yeah. This is good. I love it. Man, this is a great year for boxing, man. I know the pandemic's happening, but this is that year, man. This is that year. Wild stuff, man. I think Gary Russell Jr. would be like one of the first guys in boxing history to ever go from featherweight to welterweight. I think maybe some other guys did it, but that was when there was only like 3 different weight classes in boxing. But Gary Russell would be one of the handful of guys who ever do it if he can pull it off. This is definitely historic. Let me know how you guys feel about it, though. Gary Russell Jr. since the contract, I hate to Bob Arum. Give me that fight with Terrence Crawford, man. Give me that fight with Terrence Crawford. Let me know how you guys feel about it, though. Like, comment, subscribe. It's the Empire. GeoBox Empire. Peace. GeoBox.